The Western Hemisphere Prosperity and Security Alliance. What is it? Why does it matter? And also, what is the deal with all the pushback on bringing in 49 people from South Africa? We're going to be talking about all that and more with Congressman Gary Palmer on 1819 News, the podcast. We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy. Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. Brian Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of this here podcast, where we are in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week, bringing on someone I have deep respect for and have benefited greatly from, even generationally, and I'll get into why that is, to talk to you about some of the things that are going on in D.C. and bringing on Congressman Gary Palmer, who is the congressman of the 6th Congressional District, which got shaken up a little bit in the redistricting to where he's now my congressman, and I live in Wetumpka. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But I'm going to bring him on to tell his story. We're going to talk about the Western Hemisphere Prosperity and Security Alliance. I think that's very, very interesting, and what he's been doing in D.C. with that. And then talk about what Congressman Palmer's future is going to be and what his plans are. And so we'll do that. And then we have an overtime segment where I'm just interested to, what would it be like to be a congressman or a senator these last 120 days since Trump was inaugurated? I'm sure it's been pretty wild. And so we're going to get some stories from him about that. But before we jump in, I want to tell you guys, if you're not supporting us financially, please do that. We are citizen-supported news. We're not sponsored by Alabama Department of Mental Health like some of these other outlets. We're not supported by Alabama Department of Public Health like some of these other outlets, or the Alabama Department of Transportation like some of these other outlets, okay? We are citizen-supported news. We're supported by the people who benefit from our content, okay? And the people who benefit from our content is not the government. It's not the huge corporations, okay? It's not the people in positions of power. It's you, the citizen. And so we need you to support us. You can do that by becoming a member. Go to 1819news.com. Go to the top. There's a button that says Become a Member. Click that. Membership start as little as $5 a month. With that, you get access to special behind-the-scenes content like we're going to be recording with Congressman Palmer today. But you also get cool merch, and behind-the-scenes content and cool merch is great. But more than anything, you get to be the citizen in citizen-supported news. So please go do that today. And without further ado, we'll welcome in Congressman Gary Palmer. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me on, Brian.
Yeah. And so I want to kind of express a level of appreciation for you that I am in a unique situation as the CEO and founder of 1819 News. 1819 News was birthed by the Alabama Policy Institute. 35 years ago, probably more than 35 years ago now, you founded the Alabama Policy Institute, and it was an idea, and you took an idea and you turned it into an institution who's been here since I was 5 years old. Okay. And you've created this incredible institution. And what people don't know about institutions is what they really are. It's a network of people who work together to make things happen. And you created an unbelievable, incredible network of the most godly, amazing people who are warriors, who have financial abilities. You worked for decades creating that network. And Caleb Crosby ends up taking over for you as you go into Congress, and he had the idea of starting a media outlet and brought me in to do it. And so I am basically standing on your shoulders, taking the work that you did for 35 years and standing on that and bringing it to hopefully new levels that you'd be proud of. So thank you for that work.
Well, it was a calling. I wasn't prepared in any respect to do that. I worked for 2 international engineering companies, and I worked for Rust International and was listening to a broadcast by James Dobson, Focus on the Family.
Yeah. And
at the end of the broadcast, he talked about this conference they were going to have at their campus, and they were still in Pomona, California at that time. It was 1989. And my wife heard it, and I was already at work. She called me and said, "Are you going to apply for this conference?" I said, "No, I'm not qualified for any of the." I mean, it was for Christian counselors. I worked for an engineering company. I told her I might need counseling, but I wasn't qualified. And he was only going to take 25 people. And she said, "Well, you've been praying for God to open the door. Don't you think you could open that one?" And so this was pre-email.
Yeah.
I called them. They mailed me an application. couple of weeks later, I filled it out and sent it in, and they called me and interviewed me, and I was chosen. And while I was out, it was a 4-week program, and I had to quit my job to go.
Yeah.
And I knew this was one of those times when I had to decide, was I going to follow my faith or was I going to try to maintain my security? Because I grew up dirt poor.
Yeah.
My wife used to tell me I'd never quit my engineering job because I'd be poor again. But I went out there, Brian, and knowing that I didn't fit in the counseling perspective, but the last week I was there, found out they were starting these family policy councils, and I knew that's what I was supposed to do, even though I'd never even been to our state capitol. I mean, you talk about not qualified. I wasn't qualified for that either. And came back, and we got it started, and within a year and a half, Focus said we were the model organization. And then about 3 years later, I was asked to be part of a meeting out in Colorado Springs. Heritage Foundation hosted it. Former Secretary of Education Bill Bennett was there. A number of other people that were very, very well known in conservative circles that they wanted to talk about setting up an umbrella group to set up state-based think tanks in every state. And they elected me to the board, and then 4 years later elected me chairman of the board, and now we have a national network of state-based think tanks like API.
Yeah, and it really is incredible to see what God can do with unqualified people who just step out and say, you know what, I'm gonna be faithful. I'm gonna do what I feel God is calling me to do. Put one foot in front of the other, and then you watch Him build and do. And I think it's truly incredible. And one of the things I think is so important that API has done and continues to do, how I describe it at 1819 is in Ezra and Nehemiah, when basically Israel had been in Babylonian captivity for 70 years, and the pagan king sends them back to rebuild the walls and to rebuild the temple. And the rebuilding of the walls and rebuilding of the temple, that's that cultural aspect, that's the families, that's the people in the place, and this cultural engine that drives everything else. And he sends them back, gives them the finances and everything they need to be able to rebuild the walls. But they get back there, and there's people like Ashmu and other people who want to kill the Israelites, who are wanting to rebuild the walls. And it said that Nehemiah, as they were rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, and I think about rebuilding the walls of Christendom, while they were rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, they had a sword in one hand and a shovel in the other. Yeah. And so with one they built, the shovel, the tool, and the other they slew. And so they had a shovel in one hand building, and the other one they were fighting. And so I feel like this fight we're fighting off all of this political stuff that's really, these political problems we're facing is because we have a cultural deficiency in the family and the church overall, which you guys started out as a family-based think tank. If our churches and our families were functioning the way that they were supposed to, we wouldn't have this political onslaught that we're facing. We have generational deficiencies in the area of culture and family. But so we have to have this political fight that's going on constantly with the sword. And then with the shovel, we're trying to rebuild that Christian culture and heritage that our nation had. And I see that's kind of was what you guys are doing. It's what we continue to do here. So
yeah, well, one of the things that I've really emphasized when I was at API and even now when I'm in Congress, I love talking to young people, but I'm trying to challenge churches to be more focused on developing people for leadership. And I'm not talking about just for politics.
Yeah.
Because we need leaders in every sphere of our culture, and that's why practically every sphere of the culture has declined.
Yeah.
Is we've emphasized the wrong things.
Yeah.
And I tell young people all the time, you're going to lead, and you've seen the typical eye roll sometimes.
Yeah.
I said, no, you don't have a choice, because you're going to wake up one morning and be my age, and my generation won't be here, and you're going to roll out of bed one morning and have to make a decision. And part of what I feel part of my responsibility is to try to impact as many young people as I can so that when that day comes, they make a good decision.
Yeah.
And I really think that's one of the areas where the church has not done a particularly good job on emphasizing that the kids coming through their Sunday school classes and sitting in the pews on Sunday morning are one day going to be the ones making the decisions.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm going to do a quick promo too on that cultural piece that we're talking about and raising up future leaders in the next generation and infusing the next generation with I would just say our rich Christian heritage and culture that we've there was a gap of handing it down, and we're working on the Fred and Rita Skelton Center for Cultural Renewal, which is a new page that we're going to have at 1819 News. You'll see articles and stuff that are talking about, encouraging stay-at-home moms, from that to good architecture and everything that really just comes from our Western culture. We're going to be promoting that through the Fred and Rita Skelton Center for Cultural Renewal that you guys will be seeing soon. So anyway, I digress on that. How did you get from API? What led you into politics?
Well, we have an annual conference with the State Policy Network, and it was in Oklahoma City. And one of the guys who led the think tank in Oklahoma City had asked me to come out and speak to their Rotary Club. And so I went out there and gave a talk on leadership and got a tremendous response. I mean, literally, I was walking down the sidewalk, and a guy stopped and said, "Man, I heard your talk. It was great." They posted it on their website. Next day, I was asked to speak on a panel with the Attorney General of Oklahoma at Devon Energy, and I talked about something that really came true. I pointed out that we needed to really ramp up our energy production because Russia was the dominant market for natural gas and oil in Europe, and they were using their energy revenues to rebuild and modernize their military. Then some folks there asked me to be on a TV show where was a counterpoint with the Democratic minority leader in their legislature, and people literally started saying, "You need to run for Congress." And I really wasn't interested. I mean, I was leading a very impactful organization, but they just kept saying it. I flew home on Friday. I've got some timberland up in Lamar County near where I grew up, and that's where I go a lot of times just to get the fog out of my brain. I came home and I couldn't get it off my mind, so that Sunday night I just went in my closet and prayed and said, "Lord, I don't want to go to Congress. I don't want to be in Washington, but I didn't want to quit my engineering job to do what I'm doing now, and that's worked out. So if you want me to go, I just need a sign." I was shaving the next morning, and I got a text message from Caleb saying that Spencer Backus just announced he's not running again.
Yeah.
So initially I said I'd run, and then I had a meeting in Washington and flew home on Friday morning, absolutely determined not to run because it's just not where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I went in and told Tom Bradford Jr., who's the managing chairman of the board, that I decided not to run. He said, "Well, don't make an announcement. I want you to pray about it over the weekend. You come see me first thing Monday morning." And I went home to tell my wife, thinking she'd be relieved because Ann has never wanted to be involved in politics. So we sat down at the kitchen table, and I said, "Honey, I've decided not to run." And she said, "For years I've heard you say what's wrong with the country is you can't get good people to run." She said, "I've even heard you compare it to having to go to war." She said, "How can you expect somebody else to go if you won't?" And then she said, "I know this is not what we want, but I don't think it's about what we want. I think it's about what we're supposed to do." And she said, "I think we're supposed to do this." And so I know how to do it.
And you didn't really have a chance at winning either. Like I wasn't there. I've heard all the stories of the people who, the names, and it was between this person and that person. And then you ended up winning. And I think, you had it's not that you had no chance, but I don't think you were picked as the favorite, and you just, and those are the things where you see God at work, right? Is you were faithful, you put one foot in front of the other, and then boom.
AL.com, the experts there said that I'd finished fifth, maybe fourth out of the 7-man primary. 6 months before the primary, my name ID, one poll showed my name ID at 4%, and half the people thought they knew my name, thought I was a golfer. But I just, I went out and I talked to people, and I'm really not a politician. I'm more a policy person.
Yeah.
But I'm also about people.
Yeah.
And I just, most people realize I'm not on Fox News all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm influencing things. I'm influencing other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. And we had I made the runoff, and then we had a debate down at Regents Ballpark that I think made it pretty clear.
Yeah. That's good. I like it. All right. Well, now that you're in Congress, you've been up there for a while. It seems the thing that you're focused on the most now is the Western Hemisphere Prosperity and Security Alliance. I was talking to Hope Dawson, no relation. Mm-hmm. I always said, though, because Hope's dad was Scott, and he ran for governor, and everyone always asked me, are you related to Scott? I says, well, that depends if he gets elected. If he's elected, that's my long lost uncle. Yeah. But if not, we'll just continue to be friends. Yeah. But Hope came and saw me, and she was kind of outlining this, and I was fascinated with it. And for other reasons, I've really been diving into, you talked about the energy deficit with Russia or whatever. We have rare earth and minerals problems. Our enemies don't have those problems. And when you're talking about everything from semiconductors to all kinds of other things, Vivek Ramaswamy did a really good job during his campaign pointing out this deficit that we had, and I didn't even know that it existed. You've obviously probably been aware of it before Vivek ever talked about it. And that seems to be one aspect of it. Tell us about this alliance.
Well, I worked for 2 international engineering companies, so I'm really focused on things that are really nerdy. And I started looking at some of the dependencies that we had on in China, and it really came into focus during COVID because we found out that 80% of our pharmaceutical ingredients either come from China or India. We didn't have production capacity to meet our needs for personal protective equipment. We were having, and China cut us off. We implemented the Defense Production Act during COVID to force companies that were making one product to make products that we needed for people during COVID. And I started looking at some of these other things and realized that we're dependent on China for rare earth elements. And people say, well, what's that? There are about 17 elements out there that are not in abundance like a lot of other things that you have to have for your computers, for your cell phones, to operate our fighter aircraft. Our military is totally dependent on it. And I found out that there's not a single major refinery for rare earth elements in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow.
If I said there's not one in the U.S., that'd be bad enough, but there's not a single one in the Western Hemisphere. And then, so I started talking about this, that we need to address this. But what brought it into really sharp focus for everybody, and I'm talking about everybody, was the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I was asked to speak at a global energy summit, and one of the first things I said was the war in Ukraine did not create the energy crisis. Joe Biden tried to blame the spike in prices on that. I said, it didn't create that energy crisis. It exposed it.
Yeah.
But it also exposed something else, that no nation should be reliant on an adversarial nation for anything as critical to its economy and national security as energy, and you can add critical minerals and rare earth elements.
Yeah.
And Brian, I've had so many diplomats from Europe, West Central Asia, Indo-Pacific, Latin America. I've had so many come to see me since in the last 3 years that I've lost count.
Yeah.
I was the one pushing Ukraine to approach the United States because I told them, I said, we're not going to give you any more money. We're not going to give you any more weapons. You need to come to us like Britain did in 1941 and have an agreement where we will sell you the weapons and use your critical minerals as collateral. And we finally got there a couple of months ago. But that's how critical the situation is, not only for the United States, but for the entire Western Hemisphere.
Yeah. Also not a good idea to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. Just throwing that out there. That's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there. But yes, I talk about more why I had Leland, someone you know well. Leland sat in that chair and he broke down to me the Ukraine situation, the rare earth and, minerals in a way I'd never heard it put. Why do we need those? Why are they so important?
Because none of your electronics will work without them. Our military has to have them. But a lot of people separate our national security from our economic security, but if our economy collapsed, it would be a national security catastrophe.
Yeah.
If our military wasn't able to defend us, we wouldn't have the economy we have. So those go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And take one rare earth element's antimony. You have to have antimony to harden lead for ammunition. So we're getting our antimony by recycling dead car batteries. That's insane, Brian.
Yeah.
I mean, and China has cut us off from all rare earth elements. They had already cut us off from gallium, germanium, and antimony.
Yeah.
Then they cut us off from 5 more. Now they've cut us off from all of them. They've even threatened some of our allies not to provide us with them. So I've gone to, during the Trump campaign last year, his domestic policy advisor came to me with another guy, and they wanted my input on what they ought to do. And I suggested then that they declare energy and critical minerals as a national emergency or critical to our national security and use the Defense Production Act. And what I'm pushing the Trump administration doing, and this is what they're doing, is the day you permit the mine, and we need to permit on day one. It doesn't mean we're going to destroy the environment. We'll abide by all of our environmental laws, but we can't wait 7 to 10 years to get a permit.
Yeah.
We don't have that much time. So permit on day one, the mine, but the same day permit the processing, the smelting, and the refining.
Yeah.
And the thing about rare earth elements is they're not deep. They're subsurface. Some of them are on the surface. You can get them from coal ash. We've got coal ash ponds.
You got plenty of that.
Yeah. There's rare earth elements in there. It's not all. You won't get all of the rare earth elements, but they're in that. And then you can dry the coal ash, crush it, and use it to make cement or to harden asphalt. There's coal ash and mine tailings. And I met with some folks, a guy last week. There's a company that builds modular processors. That means they can build them pretty quick. He said in 3 months they'd be able to process 200 metric tons. Well, that's one of the ways we resolve this is to be able to do that, but we still got to have the refining capability.
Mine and refine. That's what I was talking to Hope about yesterday. We were talking about this, mine and refine. How much? So I would love your opinion. I think you're very brilliant when it comes to policy and analyzing things. I think there's also a generational view of things from your generation to mine. We're highly critical of NAFTA and free trade. We're becoming much more nationalistic. And the reason that my generation is becoming so hardcore nationalistic is because we see that we're dependent on our enemies for basic things, and we're dependent on our enemies for basic things because we've fallen for this global economy idea that that we have no borders. We're everything's the same, and we'll have India do everything and China do everything, and we'll move our factories out. And it was this liberal global utopian idea that was pushed by George H.W. Bush and other Republicans to abandon national sovereignty and push for this global economy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it actually started with the Nixon administration. It was a bipartisan perspective, and they said that Nixon opened the door to China. Well, China opened the door to Nixon.
Yeah.
And China embarked on something that was remarkable. In the 1980s, they were committed to building out their energy infrastructure to support manufacturing and industry. And they had a strategy all along. They've got a long-term strategy called the 100-Year Marathon. And there's a book by that name. The author is Michael Pillsbury, and I highly recommend it to your readers. The 100-Year Marathon by Michael Pillsbury.
Different than the Gramsci 100-Year March to the Institutions?
No, it is. Yeah,
okay,
this is about China. China's ambitions. Mao felt like China had been humiliated, and they'd gone through a century of humiliation, and so he put together this 100-year march toward China being the superpower, not a superpower, but the superpower.
Okay,
and that culminates in 2049, and Xi Jinping believes that he's the anointed one to achieve that. So I kind of digress here.
No, that's good.
But in the 80s, they launched this effort to build out their power generation facilities to support manufacturing and industry. And from 1990 to 2020, they raised over a quarter of their population out of poverty into the middle class and added over 8 years to the life expectancy of the people. Well, it's also worked against their interest because now they have a middle class, and they don't want to send their only son, because most of them only had one kid, and it was a boy. They don't want to send them to war. They don't want to live in poverty again. And they've got a population now that's so aged that their reproduction rates are way down. India now has more people than China. China did the same thing. They've raised a quarter of their population out of poverty in the middle class, added over 8 years to life expectancy. So what I told the Trump administration is, look, China has become a dominant influence in Latin America, most particularly in South America.
Yeah.
And you've got Brazil in bed with them. You've got Venezuela, Colombia, with that idiot president down there, Petro.
Mm-hmm.
So what I suggest to them is after Javier Milei got elected, I went down for his inauguration. There's a chance to create this Western Hemisphere alliance as a soft power alternative to China, not through government aid, but through collaborative private investment. Help them build out their energy infrastructure.
Yeah.
Help them be in a position to build processors or refineries. So the first trip that Marco Rubio made as Secretary of State was to Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, and Panama. A month later, I led a congressional delegation down. And when you have these trips, you go to 4 or 5 countries, you might meet with one head of state. We met with all 4 presidents. And this is what I laid out. I literally told President Arevalo in Guatemala, they're bi-coastal. They have Pacific and Caribbean coast. And I said, you improve your ports. We help you build out your power grid through private investment. And you bring in a processor and refinery for rare earth elements. And I said, Mr. President, the world will be the path to your door. So we're very focused on this. And in terms of free trade, we believe in fair trade.
Yeah.
And I think and collaborative trade. And you know how many times, like I said, I met with all 4 presidents. You know how many times they brought up USAID? Zero.
Yeah.
The Biden administration was using it to push DEI, and they're not for that.
Yeah.
They're culturally conservative.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. The same thing's happening in Africa. I was invited to a breakfast in Washington with the first ladies of Uganda and Burundi.
They don't play that.
And Brian, the first lady from Uganda, I thought she's coming across the table, leaned across the table and she said, "Stop pushing abortion on us. We believe in the Bible." Literally from the first lady of Uganda.
They're a Christian nation. They've outlawed homosexuality. Like, they are way farther to the right than anything we're doing here in America. And it's an interesting thing. And I almost wonder if we've caused that, like, with our efforts to export democracy, like what you're talking about, going to these nations that are, I think naturally, culturally more to the right, more conservative, and we're pushing, transgender Sesame Street on them with USAID, and you're going to cause them to push back, which, anyway, so yeah, it's very interesting. If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons, it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be Bryan, Brian.Dawson, Dawson, at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you. I have a big bullet point list of all of the things that are important to make this come to pass. How far out are we from beginning to do this?
I had a meeting yesterday. We're in a meeting yesterday with Elon Musk and his team, and we had a good discussion about our reliance on critical minerals. And I shared something with Musk that I don't think he knew. The processing and refining facilities that China has are aged, and they're having a lot more difficulty getting the rare earth elements refined to the purity standards that you have to have. Yeah. And I know I'm kind of nerding out on you again.
This is good.
But they don't have the ability to upgrade those facilities in the next 5 to 6 years. And what I told Musk yesterday is this is our window of opportunity. We need to make this a top priority, because if we build these advanced systems, which are much cleaner, I mean, they're order of magnitude better than what China has. The world will be the path to our door, Brian.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm really pushing for, and it's one of the reasons that I decided to run again. Is because I felt like if I left, this wouldn't get done.
Yeah.
And I'd been, like I said, working with the Trump campaign. Now I'm working with the Trump administration on this stuff.
Sure. So something you said that I just thought was very fascinating. You said, I told Elon Musk something that I don't think he knew. And if I have a list of bucket list, like being able to tell Elon Musk something, one, just being able to talk to him is on my bucket list, but to be able to inform him of something he didn't know, I think that's impressive. That's all I'm saying.
Well, let me say this about them, and I've had multiple meetings with Musk and some of his team, is they did more in the first 8 weeks of the Trump administration in terms of government oversight than we did in 40 years. They exposed how antiquated the federal data systems are. And one of the other things we talked about yesterday was the enormous amount of money we send out in improper payments.
Yeah.
Something I've worked on almost from the day I got there. And I would say you could resolve between 50 and 60% of it just by upgrading our data systems. And I asked him, had they given any thought to taking some of these savings to reinvest it into bringing our data systems in the 21st century? And one of his top guys is a guy named Steve Davis, and he and I are supposed to get together next week by phone and start talking about how we can do this.
Yeah, I think that's great. There's so much, and I'm so unbelievably grateful for Elon Musk, and I think it's one of those things that for conservatives, it's weird. It's one thing, it's weird to watch. Like, I don't know if you saw recently, Joe Rogan is in church now. Okay, Elon Musk is a right winger. I mean, you just go on and on. All these people who helped us win this last election, who were historically center left, who've just been radicalized by the absolute absurdity of what the left has done. And pushed into our camp, and you see the smartest and wealthiest man in the world right now, Elon Musk, risked everything to help Trump get elected, literally risked everything. And now he doesn't have to be doing what he's doing. And he's spending all this time trying to fix our nation. And I saw something I've been a big Elon Musk fan, like back when everyone didn't like him very much. So we go back 5 or 6 years. I watched a video of him, and they said, what's the one thing that you credit your success to? If you could boil it down to one thing, that you're most grateful for, that's attributed to your success. And you know how he has no problem doing those long, awkward pauses in interviews. He just sat there, and then he said, America. And that was his answer. Yeah. It gave him the opportunity to be the Elon Musk that we all see, this unbelievable entrepreneur and everything else. So he knows the value of what our nation is. From South Africa, we see what's going on there right now. Anyway.
The thing that I was thinking about this morning about, again, talking to young people and what's the key to success. Find what you're good at and get better at it every day.
Amen.
That's the key to success in just about anything. That was the key to success in football. I was on the football team at Alabama as a walk-on, and I wasn't as good as these other guys, but I was pretty good. I made the team.
Yeah.
But what I saw in Coach Bryant was he was able to identify talent and put those people in a position where they could get better at what they were good at. And that's really the key here.
Yeah.
Is find what you're good at, and you might not like it. It might not be your favorite thing to do, but if you're good at it, every day get a little bit better at it.
Almost like God made you to do that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's good. Man, while I've got you, I'm just, this is off script on what I want to do. What are your thoughts on what's going on with South Africa? And I'll just kind of tee it up from where I'm coming from. So we've been told that we have to accept every flipping migrant or refugee, that we have to use the term refugee. Basically, they can come up with, 500,000 military-aged men who are obviously here to do America harm. And they're like, we're not safe in our country. Bring them in. And we had 30 million or something like that. Illegal aliens come in under the Biden administration. My numbers could be wrong on that.
It's about 20.
20, okay, 20 million. And it's open arms. You have to accept them. If you don't, you're racist. Okay. And now we're saying maybe we should shy away from just bringing everyone from all the countries that could never assimilate to Western countries, even if they wanted to. Maybe we should slow some of that down and bring in 49 people from South Africa, and everyone loses their minds. And that show, to me, you don't need to get in trouble and say that you agree with me. Maybe you can. To me, it's not about it. Yes, do lower wages for businesses drive this? Some of it. Is replacing the electorate part of it? Some of it. But more than anything, I believe The people who want to destroy Western civilization are trying to destroy Western civilization by bringing people from third world countries that could not assimilate even if they wanted to in such numbers without requiring them to assimilate, to wipe out the West. You see it with the Muslims in Europe and the Pakistani rape gangs and everything going on there. And you see it with them bringing in Haitians and everything else here. And then the moment you bring in the Afrikaners, the white South Africans, you bring them in who are going to be able to assimilate very easily. They're waving American flags already, and they're so happy to be here, and everyone loses their minds.
Well, we've known there's a problem in South Africa for quite a while. And the video that President Trump showed the president of South Africa, that had been going on for a while.
Yeah.
So we've known about that. And my perspective on things is that we need to reevaluate our immigration system. We need to allow people to come in that we want to come in, that we need to come in. In terms of the 20 million, I don't think there's 20 million people who came here to do us harm.
Yeah.
But the problem is we don't know how many of that 20 million did come here to do us harm. And when I say do us harm, did they come as terrorists? I think there's some of them. Some of them. I think a lot of them are here just as criminals. They're here part of cartels and gang members. And we need to be able on the front end, and I've had a good discussion with Tom Homan about this. They're not going after the people who came here that want a job and want to work. They're going after the guys who came here committing the crimes.
Yeah.
And so we got to figure out a way to segregate that group to focus in on the people who are going to be a problem.
Sure.
And when people talk about, a lot of people, when they think about the people who came across our border, they mostly think Latino.
Yeah.
It's they came from 160-something countries.
Yeah.
There are people here from Canada who are here illegally. Yeah. I mean, it's we've got a huge issue of how do you identify all these people and the ones that we are willing to allow to stay, how do you get them assimilated? But I think right now the biggest threat and the thing that keeps me up at night is finding those people that came here to do us harm.
Yeah. And I think there's three forms of harm. If we talked about economic security being national security. You've got terrorists. That's just a flat out threat. You've got criminals, so drugs, sex trafficking. And then you've got freeloaders. And you have people who are here for the sole fact that we've incentivized them financially to come here and be a leech on our system as far as getting public assistance, using our public schools, using all these other things that we barely have enough of for our people. And now they've completely overloaded our hospitals, our schools, and everything else. And so that's, three in my mind. Well,
this is where the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are distinctly different, because in the bill we passed yesterday out of the House, imposing the work requirements on people on Medicaid, and also through the Ag Committee's portion on SNAP benefits, the food stamps, we will only provide those to people who are legally eligible. So that means that if you're an able-bodied adult with no dependents, you got to go to work.
Yeah.
But if you're here illegally, you don't get them.
Yeah.
And the Democrats went crazy.
Yeah.
And it got so bad in our markup in the Energy and Commerce Committee because we kept saying you're lying about that. That's a lie. They got the committee chairman to ban the use of the word lie in our markup. Yeah. That markup went 26 and a half hours. And you know who Dan Crenshaw is, the representative from Texas, Navy SEAL, eye patch. And he inadvertently said, that's a lie. And they went crazy. Yeah. So the speaker asked him to take that down. He said, that's misinformation. Well, they had also gotten upset when we referred to him by name. Instead of the gentle lady from California, we were saying Congresswoman and call her name, Barragan. And she got, he referred to one of them from Washington. She got mad. And Dan had us all rolling. He said, if I had two eyes, I'd roll both of them. But the stuff they were saying, the stuff they continue to say is just a flat-out lie.
Yeah.
In 2017, when we passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the Congressional Budget Office that the Democrats keep quoting said 13 million people would lose their health insurance and 5 million people would be dropped from Medicaid. Nobody lost their health insurance. Nobody was dropped from Medicaid.
Yeah.
It's just one lie after another.
Yeah. Yeah, that's seems to be part of their part of their strategy is just throw as many lies out as possible, and then we have to defend ourselves from all of them.
Well, they said 92% of the able-bodied adults on Medicaid are already working, and I said, well, if that's the case, why are you opposed? No, why are you opposed to work requirements?
Yeah,
if they're already working,
that's good. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, let's shift gears now to bring it home. Your future. So obviously, one of the things that you received a little bit of criticism from when you ran last time was your term limit pledge from when you initially ran. You decided that you were going to go ahead and run again, whatever, but now we're looking at the next 2 years. What are your thoughts on that, and what are your plans?
Well, I think I need to stay through the Trump administration. I just turned 71 last week. I spent my birthday in a 26.5-hour markup. But I think, like on this Western Hemisphere alliance, I think we've got to get that done.
Yeah.
We've got to secure our critical minerals. There are things I've put together a recommendation on how to fix Medicaid that Speaker Johnson loved. The White House likes it, but they didn't think that they didn't want to get it into this bill. So some of this is stuff I've worked on, like I said, for 3 or 4 years that I want to complete.
Yeah.
So I made a mistake, and I own that.
Yeah.
I said that last year when I announced that I was going to run again. That's on me. I shouldn't have said I'd only serve 5 terms.
Yeah.
But I came under the conclusion that was a wrong decision, that I needed to stay.
Yeah.
Because it's not because I love being in Washington. I don't like it any better today than the day I flew home and decided I wouldn't run.
Yeah.
But it's where I think I'm supposed to be, and the job's not done.
Yeah. No, and I think you're doing important work up there, and this is helpful for me because I'm, and you've been on the outside when you were at API. You were on the outside criticizing those who were on the inside. You've been there. Mm-hmm. You did that for a long time. And now you're on the inside, and so it's our job.
Still criticizing someone on the inside.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point. And so, it's my job. It's our job here at 1819 News to hold people in positions of power accountable. Period. And we did. And when you said you were going to run again, we brought up the term limit thing. You gave us your answer, and then you got to work. And it's not like you were. How much did you win by? When it was like 80% or something, and it was in a new district on top of that. So obviously the people of Alabama spoke, and that was not an issue to them. I think you're doing incredible work with this alliance that we just discussed, and you have great ideas. And I've talked to a lot of people who understand how Washington D.C. works. Specifically as people are talking about Tuberville leaving and, who needs to replace Tuberville, how old do they need to be? Because it really is, it's a long-term game. And the longer you're there, the more influence you have. And you've got, you've been in there 10 years and it's like, okay, I want to come home. It'd be one thing if we had term limits, and then it's like, yes, but why term limit yourself? I get all those arguments, but I do think that seniority matters. And I do think there's something to be said for the relationships that you built and the influence that you have with people like Elon Musk. So I think that's good. Any last parting words for the audience?
I think in terms of term limits, my first 3 terms in Congress, there were 109 Republicans who left. They didn't get beat. They just quit. That's half a majority.
Yeah.
And they didn't have time to really have an impact.
Yeah.
And the problem up there is the bureaucrats. There's another book that I highly recommend. It's entitled "You Report to Me."
Yeah.
And it was written by the Secretary of Interior who replaced Ryan Zinke, David Bernhardt. Everybody ought to read that. There's probably 4 bills that I'll eventually introduce out of that book dealing with the bureaucracy. They did everything they could to thwart the Trump agenda.
Yeah.
Because they look at you or me, they look at President Trump and think, I was here before you got here and I'll be here when you leave.
Yeah.
The most important thing that they've done is when they started doing the Doge operation, was getting rid of those people.
Yeah.
And the job's not done there either.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I'm really pushing Musk and his team to invest in the IT to bring our data systems into the 21st century, because I guarantee you, Brian, we don't need half of the ones that are left.
Then respond to this email if you're there. Remember that, where they basically sent out an email, like just respond to this email with 5 bullet points of what you did this week.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we are, where we don't have a system showing what people are doing. We literally have to send an email out saying, give us 5 points. And if we had the data systems, that wouldn't be the case.
Well, that was a lot of what the meeting yesterday was about.
Yeah.
Is all of this paper documents that we're pushing around and the lack of interaction, like on Social Security. The way Social Security builds their master file on death master file is that when someone dies, a relative has to call an 800 number, and then they do a paper document.
Yeah.
And Ethan and I were kind of joking about this, that the coroner ought to have a toe tag with a QR code on it.
Yeah.
You just scan it, and all that information goes to the county, the state, and the federal government.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do that.
Yeah. I mean, we have pretty advanced technology in our country. It just never seems to seep its way into the government, which is weird because you would think those technology companies would be, advertising that technology to the government for them to pick it up and use it and get contracts. So Either way. All right. Well, Congressman Gary Palmer, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Brian.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, if you're not a member, that means you're not going to see the behind-the-scenes content, the overtime segment I'm going to be doing with Congressman Gary Palmer as we talk about what it's like being in Congress for the first 120 days of Trump 2.0, Trump's second presidency since the inauguration. So we're going to be diving into some of those stories, and if you're not a member, you'll miss that. So go become a member today, 1819news.com, click the button, become a member, so that you can have access to this content, but more than that, so that you can be the citizen and citizen-supported news. So, as always, until next time, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.